And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, December 26th. I'm the host for today's program, Paul DeMain. And many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryTV.com. And here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. While Idle No More in Canada is spearheaded by the fast of Chief Teresa Spence, now entering her third week in a teepee set up outside of the capital of Canada on Victoria Island near Ottawa. Here in the United States, events continue to build, with a 4-day support fast beginning on December 27th and worldwide flash mob hand drum demonstrations taking place across North America and support events now worldwide. Bill C-45 is not just about budget, says Idle No More founder Sylvia McAdam. It lowers the threshold for community consent and surrender for the use of Indian Reserve lands in Canada. Another founder, Sheila McLean, reminds people that the bill is about everybody. Changes being made to the environmental legislation is stunning in terms of the protection it takes away from the bodies of water, rivers, and lakes across the country. Tribal delegations to the House of Commons invited by the New Democratic Party when C-45 was being debated last fall were refused entry. So, Aboriginal First Nations around the world, along with environmentalists, continue to call upon Prime Minister Stephen Harper to honor treaties with the Indian nations and to open an honest dialogue in Canadian responsibilities toward the treaties that delivered a wealth of resources and higher living standard to the rest of the country. Meanwhile, in the United States, hundreds of flash mob hand drum protests, sit-downs in the cold, and at the Canadian consulates and support events continue to grow as well, including in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where one of the nation's oldest get-in-your-face activists, Clyde Belcourt, went limp and laid on the floor of the Mall of America after police asked protesters to leave, forcing law enforcement officials to call an ambulance to help oversee his arrest. A 4-day Lakota Nation Invitational in Rapid City, South Dakota has given the city a financial boost of about $5 million. The Rapid City Journal reports that local retailers, restaurants, and hotels benefited from the annual event that wrapped up this weekend. The event drew larger crowds, spending more money as tens of thousands of Native American students, parents, and sport fans flooded the city. The event is part basketball tournament, part academic challenge, and part family reunion for tribal members. Rushmore Plaza Civic Center General Manager Brian Baliska says he expects final figures to show that about 2,000 more tickets were sold for the basketball games this year compared to last. He also said as about 41,000 people came through the Civic Center doors and that concession sales increased by 11%. The New York State Attorney General's office is suing a Washington-based tobacco manufacturer, accusing it of illegally selling hundreds of thousands of cigarettes in New York City and the state each year without paying the required state excise taxes. The lawsuit against King Mountain Tobacco Company and its president, Delbert Wheeler, was filed December 21st in U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York. Attorney General Eric Schneiderman said in a statement the company sells and distributes its cigarettes in New York without shipping them to a state licensed stamping agent as required by New York tax laws. King Mountain is Indian-owned and is located on the Yakima Reservation in the state of Washington. A 43-minute interview with Delbert Wheeler, which covers a discussion about the treaties invoked by the Yakima Nation to protect the cigarette trade, can be seen at the URL found below. 4 people are facing federal charges filed on December 11th after taking part in a protest against snowmaking on the San Francisco Peaks at the Coconino National Forest Service 3 months earlier. Clee Benally, Dawn Carol Dyer, Michael James Andes, and Evan Hawbaker all face charges of interfering with a Forest Service officer. On September 21st, more than a dozen Flagstaff community members hand-delivered letters and more letters to the Forest Service to address the U.S. Department of Agriculture policy on sacred sites, who read the letters and then asked the group to leave, according to the Navajo Hopi Observer. Hall Baker faces charges that he tipped over a 5-gallon bucket of treated sewage as the delegation left the building. The Forest Service called a hazardous waste team to examine the liquid. Several tribes, environmental groups, and individuals continue to protest court rulings that allow a private ski company to manufacture snow from treated sewage water on the slopes of the peaks they deem sacred. They were Dakota Warriors. They met their fates with courage 150 years ago. The 38 condemned men, their hands bound behind them, rushed to the gallows that had been specially built for them on the edge of the Minnesota River in Mankato, Minnesota. They danced in place as the rough hewn nooses were pulled over their heads. All wore white muslin caps with flaps on them, pulled down to obscure faces adorned with ceremonial paint. The 1862 Dakota War was coming to a different deadly climax. According to an eyewitness report in the New York Times of the largest mass execution in American history, most of the men on the scaffold sang a slow Indian death song. Some of the condemned included a few of mixed blood who had embraced Christianity, sang a song of their faith. Several others had their hands free and clasped a final grip with the men next to them. Meanwhile, about 4,000 people watched. They were being monitored by more than 1,400 uniformed soldiers in the Minnesota 6th, 8th, and 9th regiments, there to assure the men died of hanging and not from a mob attack. Just after 10 a.m. on Friday, December 26, 1862, 150 years ago today, a drum was sounded 3 times. Captain William Dooley stood ready with a knife at the base of the platform. As the final drum beat echoed, Dooley severed the heavy rope on his second try, releasing the traps beneath the warriors' feet, all plunged down from the 20-foot platform. A member of a Native American gang has pled guilty to murdering another gang member in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The U.S. Attorney's Office, a Native mob member, Sean Martinez, admitted in a plea agreement December 21st that he had shot and killed Jeremy Kraske in February 2011 to keep him from giving information to law enforcement officials. Martinez faces a potential sentence of life in prison. A federal indictment last January accused 24 suspected Native mob members of conspiracy to participate in racketeering, including murder, house shoot-ups, beatings, and acts of arson, using violence and intimidation to keep the gang in power. So far, 20 defendants have pled guilty. The remaining 4 to go on trial January 22nd. Authorities says the gang wields considerable power from the Twin Cities to reservations throughout Minnesota, South Dakota, and northern Wisconsin, where they're known to sell cocaine, heroin, and pharmaceuticals. North Dakota's United Tribes Technical College plans to open a new learning center in downtown Rapid City, South Dakota. The Rapid City Journal reports that officials from the Bismarck College made the announcement last week in Rapid City. School officials say the new Technical Learning Center will be located on the National American University campus and could be ready for students in time for the 2013 fall semester. UTTC has an enrollment of about 1,400 students. Its Bismarck campus offers 2- and 4-year degree programs and online courses. College spokesman Phil Baird says the Rapid City area students could have the opportunity to tap into those online programs as early as this summer. And that's going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us and come back again soon.